Today, I'm going to show you guys how I took this image on an iPhone 6 and turned it into one of these. Let's get started. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I'm going to show you how I took this Lamborghini Aventador photo on my iPhone 6 and then I turned it into this photo right here. Now, when I originally posted this photo on my Instagram, a lot of people were like, no, this can't be taken on an iPhone. So what I want to do today is break down exactly how I turned this photo into a professional looking DSLR shot, even though it was taken on an iPhone. So let's get started. All right, so we're here in Photoshop now, and the first thing you can see is the actual raw image itself. This was taken by Dorney Lake during a supercar driver event that I attended. This is not a very pleasing looking image. So there's a lot that we can actually do to this image. And the first thing that I did, obviously to start off with, is to just cut around the entire car. And then I actually reduced the size of it as well because I wanted to get it in frame for the background. Now, originally when I took this photo, I had no real intention of actually doing anything with it. But while I was there, we had a couple of professional photographers. I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to take a photo of this on my iPhone and I'm going to make it look as professional as I can. So that's exactly what I did. So once the car had been cut out, I had to kind of find a suitable background in which this would be placed and look fairly decent as a final shot. So this is the one that I came up with. And straight away, once you put it in there, you could see that it just doesn't look right. So obviously we need to add some shadows. So the first thing that I did was just create a basic shadow layer, just to add one sort of layer underneath where the actual car would be sitting, where it would be the darkest part of the shadow. But then I needed like a template to actually create a long part of the shadow. Now with this background, you can actually see I've added a few more elements. So if this is the original background, this layer right over here, I actually added a glare to the sky as well, as you can see on the right hand side. And then just to sort of match that, I added a additional layer, which is where the sun would be. Now this is just a sort of a painted layer with a brush, white brush, just to give that highlight on this section. And the reason for that is if you look at the original car photo, let me just hide that. Once you look at the original car photo, you can see that the right hand side of the car, in this picture at least anyway, it will be the car's actual left, but in the picture on the right hand side you can see the brightest areas are this side over here where you can see the cursor. Therefore the background had to have an element of sun to the right hand side to obviously match where the original car's highlights would have been. So that's why this area here was chosen. And then that kind of overall, if you look at the actual background itself, it actually shows that those are the areas also where the buildings are actually highlighted. So it would make sense for the highlights to be on the right hand side. So that's what I did. And then you can see that this shadow obviously isn't looking any good really. So what I did, not really having any kind of template to work from to create a shadow, I left the original layer there, as you can see, but then I loaded up Forza Horizon 4. Now, I use that sometimes just to get the shadows and the templates of the cars properly done. And if you look at one of my previous videos from 5 years ago, was also done in Forza Horizon 4, just to get the right sort of shadows in place and sort of create that final shot. But in this case, I used it just to get a rough idea of how the car would look. And that's what you see here. So if I remove that, this is not the Aventador S, this is just the standard Aventador, but you can see I've actually placed the car in a very, as close to the same angle as I took the picture, just so that I can get the angle of the shadow here, which is what you can see. So I brought that into Photoshop, then I actually cut the shadow out. So if I remove that, you will see that there's a slight extension of this shadow, and then this is the actual shadow that is actually from Forza as well. And I made some slight adjustments just to make it a little more realistic to the actual car itself in this case. Now when you look at that, it looks a lot better with the actual shadow added, and it aligns with the light coming from the right hand side as well. So Forza, actually this was done in Motorsport 7, sorry, this is Forza Motorsport 7. So this actually helped massively in order to get the shadow that I needed to make the scene look a lot better. So if I now turn this off and I go back to the original photo, so it went from that already that's looking pretty good. Now just to sort of add on top of the scene that you see here and just build the image to the final shot, I added a flare. You can't really see that too much, but if you just look here, you can see, I'm gonna hide these. You can see that there's a flare layer over here. And this flare layer was just added in just to add a few more elements. But I mean, you can barely see it, but it is those small little elements that do add up to make that final image. So once all those elements were added in, we made a stamp layer and added a camera raw filter. Now, if I just open the filter itself, you'll see that there's some very slight adjustments that have been made. So we've just reduced the highlights just a little bit, reduced the shadows, and then we've added some clarity. And if I just move that, you will see that it just makes the image pop a little bit more. And then just a bit of color. And I have increased the yellows. The reason I've done that is obviously because the brake calipers are yellow. That's about it, really. Nothing really too crazy on this image. What you will also notice as well is if I turn this off, the rims, now I would like to zoom in on the rims, they were very dark. So once I had actually lowered the shadows, I did have to bring the rims and the brake calipers up a little bit so that it does show. And just to give a few more reflections, that sort of more crisper kind of look, because you don't want too much detail to be showing here, because if I do zoom in, you will see that there is a reflection of, I think there was another Porsche next to it over here or something. So obviously that wasn't something that I wanted to have show in the reflections. And then other than that, I think all I did was just tidy up the floor, a few little bits and pieces here on the paintwork, and then I kind of merged those layers before I created this final image. Ultimately, that is how we went from this image to this image. And I just wanted to show you guys that it's not necessarily about how many megapixel your camera is, because it really doesn't matter. If you know what you're doing, if you have a bit of skill in terms of post-production and how you can achieve the final look that you're actually going for, you just need to use one of these things and you'll be perfectly fine. Now, of course, that entirely depends also on what you're actually using the final image for. If you're using it for print, then yeah, of course, you need a high quality mirrorless camera or DSLR or a medium format camera to achieve the look that you want, depending on what your client is asking for. But if it's for social media, you don't need to have a crazy camera. These things nowadays are so sophisticated that they can actually achieve cinematic level quality in terms of what you can shoot with it. So I hope you found that video useful and understand the fact that you don't need a stupidly expensive camera to create some decent photography. If you know what you're doing with a bit of skill, you can create some pretty decent high-end photography. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing to the channel. Let me know if you guys want to see more videos like this, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.